you're watching the Daily Roundup by People's Dispatch, where we bring you some of the top stories from around the world. Let's take a look at the headlines. Colombian president says ceasefire to end violence imminent. Germany to nationalize energy giant amid supplies crisis. Protests in Ecuador over woman lawyer's murder. Philippine Communists, not terrorists, rules a judge. Colombian President Gustavo Petro on Thursday, September 22, announced he will soon announce a multilateral ceasefire between the government and armed groups in the country. He added that the Colombian government will be resuming peace talks with armed groups such as ELN, the National Liberation Army, and FARC, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, in the next few days. The president expressed hope that such a broad, multi-party ceasefire will spell the end of violence, conflict, and death, and the major drug trafficking problem in the country. Speaking on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly's 77th session shortly before returning to Colombia, Petro said the National Army and police will participate in the ceasefire. Since being elected, he has taken numerous steps in the interest of peace, stability, and security in Colombia. Petro said all armed groups that want to be part of the process of dismantling themselves and ending the cycle of violence will be welcome. According to the think tank INDIPAZ, at least 22 armed groups have already expressed willingness to join the ceasefire and larger peace process. The Colombian government had just a few days ago announced resumption of peace talks with the armed group FARC. Similar peace talks with the ELN also restarted after a meeting between government officials and ELN representatives in Cuba last month. On the same day as the president's announcement, the government announced its new security policy to protect Colombia's most vulnerable and neglected communities, along with women's rights leaders, feminist groups, human rights activists, and groups, among others. The Colombian defense minister announced the new policy and listed its three components: military, police, and the judiciary. Germany will nationalize one of its biggest gas companies, Uniper, amid a growing energy crisis that has resulted in record high energy prices and fears of a shortage. Reports said that the government will acquire a 98.5% stake in the company for the cost of 8.5 billion euros. The government has already approved in June a bailout for the company, which saw it take over a 30% stake in the company. The latest takeover would see the government fund the company to the tune of another 8 billion euros. Uniper is the biggest purchaser of Russian gas from Germany and is currently controlled by Finnish state-owned company Fortum. It operates gas, coal, and hydropower power plants across Europe. In the first half of this year, the company accumulated losses of more than 12 billion euros in the wake of the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The conflict resulted in the European Union, including Germany, imposing sanctions on Russia and moving to gradually cut off its energy supplies. EU countries are additionally discussing a framework by which they can completely cut off energy supplies from Russia and permanently replace them with countries from Africa and the Middle East. In response to European actions, Russia cut off parts of its gas supplies to Europe and subsequently indefinitely closed the Nord Stream 1 pipeline, causing a massive spike in gas prices. Governments in Europe have to additionally deal with possible future shortages of gas and other energy sources, especially during the winter months when energy use increases significantly. Germany, which imports 40% of its gas from Russia, is especially vulnerable. Reports have noted that Germany has already spent 40 billion euros to deal with the energy supplies crisis and secure future gas supplies. The government is considering nationalizing another gas company, SEFE, in the coming days. As per government sources, talks are ongoing to take over the company and save it from bankruptcy. The Ecuadorian national government on Wednesday, September 21, reported that 34-year-old lawyer Maria Belén Bernal, who had been missing for 10 days, has been found murdered. According to reports from local media, Bernal's remains were found on the Casitagua hill, located 5 kilometers from the Quito Police Training School. She disappeared from the area on September 11 after visiting her husband, Lieutenant German Fernando Casares. Casares, who is considered the main suspect in her killing, is on the run. Bernal's murder marked the latest femicide in a country severely plagued by violence against women. According to the Aldea Foundation, which tracks the crime in the country, between January 1 and September 3, 2022, Ecuador recorded 206 cases of femicide. Bernal's case, in which the police are directly involved, has served as the last straw and sparked widespread outrage against the state and its institutions. President Guillermo Lasso, through his Twitter account, lamented Bernal's death and assured that those responsible would be punished. Interior Minister Patricio Carrillo also mourned Bernal's death and vowed to find Casares and bring him to justice. Nevertheless, the feminist movements and social organizations which had been demonstrating in different parts of the country since September 12, demanding Bernal's safe return, denounced the involvement of the police authorities in the event. They demanded Interior Minister Carrillo's resignation over irregularities in the investigation of the case from the very beginning. On September 21, in Quito, hundreds of citizens gathered outside the Agricultural Ministry to partake in the sit-in called for by Bernal's mother. After demonstrating there for a few hours, they marched to the police headquarters demanding justice for Bernal and conviction of Casares. The protesters raised slogans denouncing the murder and against the police. They accused the police of protecting the attackers of women and demanded justice for Belen. The protests outside the police headquarters continued peacefully till the late hours of night, according to reports. And finally, a court in the Philippines on Wednesday, September 21, rejected the government's petition to declare the country's Communist Party and its armed wing as terrorist groups. The judge of the Manila Regional Trial Court, after reviewing the party's plan of action, said that the CPP, or Communist Party of the Philippines, and the NPA, New People's Army, its armed wing, do not engage in terrorism. The Department of Justice had in 2018 filed a petition to proscribe the two organizations as terrorist groups. The previous administration of then-President Rodrigo Duterte had subsequently designated the two groups as terrorist groups by issuing Proclamation 374. Reports noted that the act of designation differs from proscription as it is an executive act by the government via the Anti-Terrorism Council, while proscription is a judicial process. But the petition to proscribe the two as terrorist groups was turned down by the court after it assessed a number of factors, incidents, and pieces of evidence that were presented to it to support the petition. The CPP welcomed the court's verdict and hoped that it would stop the terrorist branding against its members, along with removing the CPP-NPA from the list of terrorist organizations. The court reportedly examined 9 incidents of violence that were presented as evidence by the government, along with government eyewitnesses. The government had claimed that the violence was committed by the CPP-NPA. One of the witnesses had reportedly identified the culprits as CPP-NPA based on the type of clothes they were wearing. The judge rejected this argument in the absence of any official uniform for CPP-NPA members. The judge further noted that none of those 9 incidents resulted in widespread and extraordinary fear and panic among the Philippine populace, which it said was one of the aims or intentions behind terrorist acts. The judge added that the incidents in question were small-time, hit-and-run, sporadic acts of violence and not deliberate terrorist acts. Additionally, the court said that those incidents failed to meet the criteria under the relevant Philippine law, which states that acts committed to coerce the government to give in to a specific demand can be defined as an act of terrorism. And that's all for today's episode. For more such stories, visit our website peoplesdispatch.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.